How does a student qualify for PCA services, and how do paraprofessionals document these services that are being provided during the school day? Here is an overview of what we will discuss today. An introduction to third party, what are PCA services, how does a student qualify, and what are the responsibilities of the paraprofessionals. Some paraprofessional services can qualify for federal reimbursement from the Department of Human Services for students in special education that need assistance with personal care services due to the student's disability. Paraprofessionals play a variety of roles when it comes to meeting student needs. The educational role is helping students that may need assistance in math, reading, or organizational needs. The paraprofessional can also serve as a PCA, personal care assistant. The PCA role goes above and beyond the educational role by assisting the student with personal cares due to their disability. I will refer to the paraprofessional as the PCA for the rest of this presentation. How does a student qualify to be billed for PCA services? Each student in special education has an IEP, Individual Education Plan, that discusses the needs of the student. A team of professionals has determined that the student qualifies for special education and that a PCA is necessary for the student to succeed during the school day. Due to the student's disability and the level of personal care needs, will determine the needs of a PCA support from a paraprofessional. To summarize, in order for a student to qualify to be billed for PCA services, the student must be in special education and needs a paraprofessional to provide some type of personal care service due to their disability. Here are some examples of personal care services that a PCA would provide to a student during the school day. Services such as eating, toileting, dressing, and grooming. For example, assisting the student in the task of eating could be carrying their food tray, opening packages, arranging food on their plate, or monitoring the student for choking. All of these tasks provided by a PCA would qualify for PCA services under the task of eating. Behavior is another example of a personal care service. If a student has a tendency to be aggressive toward themselves, other students, or destroy property, the PCA will need to monitor and redirect this student's behavior so that it doesn't escalate. These are all behaviors that could qualify a student for PCA services. All PCAs that provide a personal care service will need to take a PCA certification test that is required by the Department of Human Services. By taking this test, you will become certified as a PCA and can begin providing this type of service within a school setting. In the near future, you will receive an email with the test link to take the PCA certification test. Please follow the instructions on the email and it will guide you through the process. There is also a study guide attached that can be downloaded to use while taking the test. This test has 25 questions and you need to get 20 out of 25 questions in order to pass. Once you pass, you will receive a certificate that certifies you as a PCA as shown on this page. You will need to either print the certificate or email it to the person sending you the email. This will show that you are PCA certified. If you fail the test, you can retake it immediately. Each classroom will get a third-party folder at the beginning of the year with all of the necessary forms that are required for billing for PCA services. The first step is to find the students that qualify to be billed for PCA services in your classroom. PCAs should fill out this personal care checklist for each student you work with that has personal care needs. This should be done at the beginning of the year and handed in to the case manager and/or the supervisor that oversees the PCA services for that student. This PCA checklist allows us to identify the unique personal care needs for each student. The supervisor will go over this checklist and make the determination if this student has personal care needs that qualify to be billed. Once your classroom has determined which students qualify to be billed for PCA support and the paraprofessional is certified, you can begin to document on this daily activity log. This activity log comes in a pre-dated packet. Let's take a closer look on how to fill out this daily activity log. PCAs will need to fill out the student name, date of birth, and school. Any PCA working with the student will need to print, sign their name, and add their initials. Each day the PCA provides personal care services to the student, you will need to answer a few questions. The first question is, was personal cares provided today? This answer is usually always yes if the PCA and the student are in school and personal care services were provided. If the student is absent, then you would write no and do a strike through the date to ensure it is not billed. If there is a paraprofessional sub for the day, then we can't technically bill that day because they haven't taken the PCA certification test. The second question is, was the student in school all day? Yes or no? If the answer to the previous question is no, then how many minutes was the student absent from school? If the student was absent for 15 minutes or more, then you would document how many total minutes the student was absent. The next question is the total minutes the student was in school. This time should be from the bell of the start of the school day to the bell at the end of the school day. Typically, there are 390 minutes of instruction in elementary school and 405 minutes in high school, but could differ depending on your district. In this section, all PCAs that provided a personal care service would add their initials to the page. This ensures that the student was in school and that the PCA provided a personal care service each day. At the end of each month, the PCA daily log needs to be signed by the case manager and sent to a designated location that will be listed in the third-party folder by the 5th of the following month. We can also bill special transportation for any students that receive daily PCA services if the student qualifies. In order to qualify for special transportation, the student needs to have an adaptation to the bus. The student either needs to be in a wheelchair, special car seat, or special harness. For any students that are extremely vulnerable, medically fragile, or have extreme behaviors, then there has to be an aide on the bus to monitor the student and assist as needed. Let's take a closer look on how to fill out the special transportation log. If the student qualifies for special transportation, then you would add a 1 in the box if the student rode the bus to school, and another 1 if the student rode the bus home. If the student got a different ride to school, then you would do a strike-through versus the 1 to show that the student didn't ride the bus on that particular morning, but rode the bus home. You should document this every school day the student rode the bus for each month. This special transportation log can be signed by any staff member that can verify the student rode the bus. The transportation log gets handed in at the end of every month along with the PCA daily log. The Department of Human Services requires any student that qualifies for PCA services to have a 10-day mini time study. The PCA will need to document the time it takes to provide each personal care service for a total of 10 days. The PCA needs to clock in and out each time a personal care service task is provided to the student. The time study comes in a packet with a total of 10 days. Record on a new sheet each day. The time study should be specific to the billable needs of each student. Each personal care service has a corresponding letter: E for eating, T for toileting, G for grooming, and so on. At the end, this study will provide an estimate of how much time is spent on each student's personal care needs daily. This is an example of one of the days of the time study. This grid has every hour and minute of the school day on each page. If you notice, the clock times going down the page, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, and so on. Across the page are the minutes for each hour 0 to 60. Let's take a closer look and break it down by 1 hour of the day. If you notice on this page, this is a 1 hour slot of the time study, 8 o'clock. In this example, the PCA is providing the personal care services of mobility, toileting, and grooming to the student. During this 8 o'clock slot, the PCA is documenting the personal care services provided to the student. At 8:01, the PCA provided the service of mobility for 2 minutes. At 8:03, the PCA provided assistance with toileting for 4 minutes. The task of grooming by washing the student's hands at 8:07, and then mobility by walking the student back to the classroom at 8:08. Now we are looking at a time study filled out for a student that was in school from 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. As you can see, this student example has lots of personal care needs due to the student's disability. Mobility, dressing, toileting, grooming, eating, and behavior. Throughout the day, the PCA tracked each minute as the service was being provided to the student. Some PCAs use a clipboard and keep it with them at all times and document the services as it was being provided throughout the day. It looks like at 7:35, the student was walked from the bus by the PCA into the school building. So the PCA marked the time with the letter M, the task of mobility. This student needs the assistance from the PCA in order to get into school and to the classroom. The PCA also assisted in dressing at 7:39 with the student's coat, hat, and boots. Now let's take a look at the 11 o'clock time slot. Again, another task of mobility as the PCA walks the student down the hall to go to the lunchroom. At 11:15, the PCA assisted the student in the task of eating by carrying the student's tray, opening packages, cutting up food, prompting the student to complete the task of eating, and reminders to chew slowly. Let's move over to the right-hand side of the page. At the end of each day, the PCA will need to total up the service letters and add it to the column on the right. For example, the task of eating took 21 minutes to complete. This is based on the amount of E's that the PCA documented for that given day for that student. The PCA assisted in toileting for 8 minutes and mobility for 19 minutes, and so on. Now let's take a look at the bottom of the time study page, the monitoring section. This area is designed to boost the time study minutes for any students that have extreme behaviors, are medically fragile, or extremely vulnerable, and needs to be monitored by a PCA all day. This is completely different tracking than the personal care services up above. This section is designed to track the entire time a PCA is monitoring the student. The only time you need to clock out is when a PCA is not monitoring the student, such as the student is at recess or working alone with a teacher. So in this example, the PCA went to the bus to assist the student into the school at 7:35 and monitored that student until 10:30. From 10:30 to 11:10, the student was at speech services and was not monitored by a PCA. The PCA clocked back in at 11:10 when they started monitoring the student again. On this particular day, the PCA monitored the student for 195 minutes. At the end of each day, the PCA adds up the total minutes the student was being monitored. There will be 2 different sets of minutes: the total minutes the PCA provided personal care services, and the total minutes the PCA monitored the student. Now we are done with the time study, and it is time to add up all 10 days. On the last page is a guide to add up the entire time study. If you notice in this example, on day 1, there was 9 minutes of toileting, 7 minutes of grooming, 11 minutes of eating, and so on. The PCA should transfer all 10 days of data to the last page of the time study, and any PCA that helped with the time study should sign the document. Here is an example of all 10 days filled out and added up. For example, once you add all 10 days of toileting, you should add up the total minutes. So for this time study, the student received 78 minutes of toileting, 56 minutes of grooming, 170 of eating, and 42 minutes of dressing, for a grand total of 346 minutes for all 10 days. So on average, this student received 34.6 minutes of personal care services each day. Here are some time study tips. The PCA needs to collect all 10 days of data. If the student is absent, keep going until you get all 10 days. Time studies are due every other year. Multiple PCAs can use the same time study packet. Total up the minutes at the end of each day. If there is more than one student in a group, the PCA should divide the minutes. All PCAs doing the time study should sign the time study total page. Third-party billing forms for PCA services are considered medical documents with the Department of Human Services. You must fill out all forms in its entirety and make sure you are documenting the PCA services accurately on the date the service was provided. At the end of each month, please make sure all documents are signed by both the PCA and the case manager, and follow the directions in your third-party billing folder. The daily PCA logs and special transportation logs are due by the 5th of the following month. The 10-day time study is due at any time throughout the year. If you have any questions regarding billing PCA services or would like additional training, feel free to reach out. Thanks for listening.